The first is the Syrian war finally coming to an end? And the second is, should David Cameron be prosecuted for war crimes in Libya? I'll talk about Libya later, but before I give you my opinion on the significance of the recent events in Syria, where a ceasefire is now in place, here's a reminder about what has been happening in Syria this week.
There's been a significant drop in violence in Syria after a week-long ceasefire brokered by Russia and the United States came into force on Monday. Relative calm appears to have prevailed across Hama, Latakia, Aleppo and Idlib, with only some allegations of sporadic and isolated incidents according to the UN. For its part, Damascus has reported a series of violations by militants in different parts of the country, as have the Russian Defense Ministry. On the other hand, militants say the Syrian government is blocking aid convoys to besieged cities in clear breach of the ceasefire agreement. The deal calls for increased humanitarian aid for those trapped inside Aleppo. Russia and America would then launch joint airstrikes and pound the positions of terrorist groups such as ISIL and Jabhat Fatah al-Sham. Over the past few months, foreign-backed militants have suffered major setbacks as the Syrian army has managed to recapture several areas. It's estimated that between 300,000 and 400,000 people have been killed in the conflict in Syria so far.
Well, I think that package just about summed up the scale of the devastation, the disaster which has been visited on the people of Syria. Hundreds of thousands dead, millions of people displaced, foreign jihadis everywhere, cutting off people's heads and slaughtering them and videoing themselves for the purposes of the entertainment of what they imagine to be their public across the world. None of which is to say that the government in Damascus was what it should have been. None of this is to say that before this conflict, Syria was run in a democratic and pluralistic way. That would be untrue. None of this is to say that the regime in Syria did not make many mistakes in the early part of the conflict. However, whatever the problems in Syria, a foreign jihadi invasion of hundreds of thousands of head cutters and heart eaters flying the black flags of Al-Qaeda and even worse of ISIS is not the answer. It's not the answer for Syria, for the region, for the Muslims, or for the wider world. That's why I always say, and I say it again now as the war might be coming to an end, I'm not with the Syrian regime. I'm just against their enemies. And I believe their enemies have to be defeated on the battlefield as a necessary but not sufficient condition. A necessary condition, but not sufficient, because the conditions which grew the horror story that is Al-Qaeda, ISIS, continue to exist. I believe the ceasefire will broadly hold, and I believe the political process negotiated between the Russian and United States leadership will begin to open the way to a political solution to the conflict. The Syrian government is satisfied with it, as are the Russians, the Iranians, and Hezbollah, and the Iraqi militias that have been providing defense strength around holy places in Syria. So if all the people who are fighting ISIS and Al-Qaeda are satisfied with the deal that has been struck, then I see no reason myself to doubt it. Although there are some who do. I see them on Twitter claiming that Russia has somehow sold out the Syrian people, sold out to the United States. I don't buy that at all.